This is WCCO.
From WCCO Television News, the Northwest Communications Center, this is The Scene Tonight, in color with Dave Moore, Bud Kraehling, Hal Scott, and Skip Loescher with Action News.
Brought to you in part by Conoco Direct Service Mileage Gasoline.
Good evening, everyone. The scene tonight moves from the Minneapolis Mall to a small Indiana highway. We'll go with federal agents on a narcotics raid. George Rice talks on the sales tax. Action News solves a pesky safety problem. And Hal Scott takes us golfing already. But the top news is Lyndon Johnson. In his State of the Union message, the president promised to persevere in Vietnam while searching for peace. And he called on Congress to join in a massive long-range attack on domestic ills, concentrating on jobs and housing and medical care for the disadvantaged. Total cost for fiscal 1969, $186 billion, the biggest budget in history. The president says revenues will take care of all but $8 billion if his tax surcharge is passed, and he sees continued economic progress if his tax surcharge is passed.
It's true there are some clouds on the horizon. Prices are rising. Interest rates have passed the peak of 1966. And if there is continued inaction on the tax bill, they will climb even higher. And I warn the Congress and the nation tonight that this failure to act on the tax bill will sweep us into an accelerating spiral of price increases, a slump in home building, and a continued erosion of the American dollar. And this would be a tragedy for every American family. And I predict that if this happens, they will all let us know about it.
$25 billion will go for the war in Vietnam if there is no settlement. Mr. Johnson says he will stop the bombing if peace talks would, quote, take place promptly and with reasonable hope they would be productive, unquote. Among those who don't agree with the president's Vietnam policy is Minneapolis Attorney James Williams. He is trying to get 1 million names on a petition to impeach the president. Williams says it's not a matter of politics, he's a Republican, but of constitutional law.
The organization's current major project, the impeachment of Johnson, in short, is a legal action. It doesn't moralize about the rightness or wrongness of Vietnam, about the rightness or wrongness of war in general, but it does unqualifiedly state that, in our opinion, Johnson's escalation and conduct of the Vietnam War amounts to a usurpation of power by the president and an organized attempt by the executive branch of the government to deprive Americans of their most fundamental civil rights, and that these actions by the president or under his direction constitute high crimes and misdemeanors, making him subject to impeachment under constitutional provisions.
There's been a lull on the Vietnam ground war, but General Westmoreland says it's only temporary, that the enemy is preparing a new offensive around the Lunar New Year, January 30th. This is the kind of minibus that could be tootling through downtown Minneapolis next fall. Today, the Metropolitan Transit Commission decided to apply for federal funds to finance a minibus system, which will cost about $270,000. A Department of Housing and Urban Development grant would furnish 2/3 of the money. The other third would come through the Metropolitan Council. Today, the argument was whether the MTC should begin a specific transit project or keep planning ahead for transit conditions of tomorrow.
If we can be of assistance as a Metropolitan Transit Commission in expediting or implementing a grant to help finance this thing, fine, I'm all for this. However, I am not in favor of taking any appreciable amounts of our monies and tying it up in this project at this time until we have the total package.
I think it's very well pointed out that, as Commissioner Burlett has, that this particular project is consistent with the language in the Transit Act, which directs us as a primary purpose to conduct experiments in transit demonstrations. And I find I must disagree with Commissioner Naraki that I think that the legislators would be very happy to see a group that is carrying on an actual experiment that we think is worthwhile.
An Air Force jet tanker crashed and burned at Minot, North Dakota this morning, killing 12 of the 13 persons aboard. None was from Minnesota. But among the victims was General Charles Eisenhart, the vice commander of the 15th Air Force. The crash occurred in heavy fog. Another dramatic and deadly reminder today that freeways and fog don't mix. It happened near the little town of Sellersburg, Indiana, as we hear in this report from Bob Johnson.
It was the start of the morning rush hour. State and local police were working an earlier accident on the fog-bound interstate while trying to handle the mixture of commuters and through truck traffic. A passenger car stopped suddenly. A semi hit it from behind and there was fire. Soon more than a dozen vehicles, most of them big trucks, were smashed and burning, and 5 men were dead.
There wasn't too much we could do. We did try to get some out of vehicles, but they were just smashed and pinned in. We were just helpless. You didn't know what to do. The fog was so thick you couldn't see anything, and nobody could see you, and the cars kept coming.
A few truckers did see the police warnings, and they lived. 2 farmers died in their pickup crushed between 2 heavy trucks. 2 other truckers died in their cabs, while the 5th managed to jump from his burning rig, only to be run down and killed by another truck. This is Bob Johnson reporting.
We'll have the narcotic story after this word from our sponsor.
Mercury's got it, that fine car touch.
And new quality Mercury's got it, the 1968 look. Come see our new facilities, as exciting as the new Mercury's inside.
Mercury's got it, that fine car touch.
And new quality Mercury's got it, the 1968 look. The Twin Cities' newest Mercury dealer. Quality Mercury.
Mercury's got it, that fine car touch.
And quality Mercury's got it, the 1968 Mercury. Get it at the Twin Cities' newest Mercury dealer. Quality, on the south side of Freeway 494 between Lindale and 35W.
Mercury's got that fine car touch.
Take your cue. Shop new quality Mercury. On Freeway 494 between Lindale and 35W, quality Mercury.
At this time last night and into the morning hours, police and federal agents in the Twin Cities were having their hands full. The long investigation into narcotics culminated last night at the Bloomington Police Department.
Get ready to roll, and we'll make our approach at exactly 6:50.
11 officers were involved in the hunt for marijuana and LSD. 4 houses were raided, and then 10 persons in Bloomington and Minneapolis were taken into custody. 4 of those apprehended were juveniles. Bloomington Captain James Pixley said many of those taken to headquarters had been under investigation for 4 months. Pixley wasn't exactly pleased with the results. He said some marijuana and LSD was confiscated. Some of those arrested tried to sell the drugs to undercover agents. The raids lasted for 5 hours before those in question were rounded up and booked. Authorities indicate that the narcotic sweep in the Twin City area isn't over, that there will be more arrests before the problem, which has centered in Bloomington the past few months, is over. But Bloomington wasn't the only spot today for narcotics investigations. An army of agents invaded the Stony Brook campus of the State University of New York today, arresting more than 24 students on narcotics charges. With that story, Richard O'Brien.
These are some of the accused filmed after their arraignment. Of nearly 36 arrested, authorities say most, but not all, were enrolled at the university. Most of them were seized as they slept in dormitory rooms. All were booked on felony charges involving sale or possession of drugs. Officials say they were not members of a ring, but operated individually. This is part of what the raiders seized. They say that green clump is marijuana. And they say this laboratory could be used to make LSD. Student opinion, predictably, was divided.
I feel they were violating the law. It's about time they got the penalty.
Has it generally been known that this has been going on out here?
Oh, yeah, everyone knows. I think there's not one student on this campus who, if he didn't want to buy some stuff, you know the right person to go to and get it anytime he wants.
Most of us, I think, feel that marijuana should be legalized, and that there shouldn't be narcos here on campus disrupting things and more or less infiltrating the student population.
There shouldn't be what on campus?
Narcos, narcotic agents.
One student grumbled because it was final week. He said those arrested wouldn't have a chance to study. The Gallup poll says a sampling shows that 7 of every 10 Americans would be willing to give their heart or other vital organs to medical science after death. The Save the Deer Committee gave its all in court today, promising to feed and take care of those deer at the Twin City Arsenal until they can be moved this spring. The committee says it will build corrals at the arsenal, trap the deer, feed them, and then transport them without using tranquilizers to wildlife areas. One of the most active members of the Save the Deer Committee is Minneapolis attorney Eugene Rirat.
I think it'd be a shame to shoot those 400 deer. They should be moved, and they can be moved, and our committee, we will do everything possible to have them removed.
Has this corral idea been used successfully elsewhere before with a large number of deer like this?
Yes, I understand that in Texas, they moved about 20,000 deer. They had only a 2% fatality.
The arsenal will have its say in court tomorrow. It is maintained that the deer are a safety hazard, that the most humane thing to do would be to shoot them. Solitary confinement tonight for Thomas Whitehawk, and a protest about his sentence in the Twin Cities. The story after this message.
I'd like to tell you about a special offer Packard Bell is making on color television. I'd like to tell you about a special offer Packard Bell is making on stereo. If you buy any Packard Bell color television console right now at the regular price, we'll give you this black and white portable free. This handy little portable is 100% solid state, and you can play it anywhere. If you buy any Packard Bell stereo console right now at the regular price, you'll get a full library of 25 LP record albums, free. And these records are by some of the most famous names in show business. So, we suggest that you visit your participating Packard Bell dealer right away, because this offer will only last till the end of February. And just remember, February is a short month. You'll find Packard Bell's special offer on color TV and stereo at Bautel's, Minneapolis, all 3 stores, and at Bautel's in Rochester.
St. Paul's proposed riot control ordinance is a dead issue. Mayor Tom Byrne tells the Scene tonight that he will not press the issue since the city's Human Rights Commission voted to bypass the proposal. Thomas Whitehawk is in solitary confinement tonight in Vermilion, South Dakota. And unless the governor intervenes, he will go to the electric chair in 1 year. The 19-year-old Mission, South Dakota boy says he's guilty of murdering a Vermilion jeweler, but he says it was an accident. And today in Minneapolis, 7 Indian agencies declared Whitehawk as a victim of discrimination and that capital punishment is not warranted. Mrs. Isabel McLaughlin of the Council of Churches.
He is undoubtedly a disturbed individual. And this boy has no right, nor will society be served, no right to go to the electric chair. We have to speak out, both Indian and non-Indian, in a protest of this kind. We have to let the governor know, Governor Niels Bowe. We have to write to Mr. Forsheim, who has a bill before the Congress in South Dakota to abolish capital punishment. The taking of another life will do nothing to rectify the harm that has been done.
In St. Paul, a member of Mayor Thomas Byrne's Minority Housing Committee, 32-year-old Donald Boyce, was given a 15-year term for manslaughter today. He was found guilty of killing Theodore Merkel last summer. George Rice takes a look at our money problems, specifically the sales tax, in tonight's WCCO editorial. George?
Dave, when Representative Robert Johnson of St. Paul announced that an interim tax committee would study the extension of the sales tax to food and clothing, he ought to have surprised no one. It was inevitable that the proposal would be made, and it probably is inevitable that it will pass. If not in the next legislature, then in the next after that. A tax on food and clothing was what sales tax backers wanted in the '67 session, but they knew they couldn't muster the vote to kill a veto if they made the tax that broad the first time around. Johnson says taxing food and clothing and giving a compensatory income tax exemption would make things simpler for merchants. He says that they wouldn't have to waste time and energy trying to figure out what was food and clothing and what was not. Now, we haven't noticed any of our storekeeper friends stumped over how to categorize a pound of cheese, but maybe our storekeeper friends are smarter. Governor Levander takes the position that food and clothing ought not be taxed, but that the law could stand some clarification, particularly as to what constitutes personal property and what real estate. The sales tax replaces the personal property tax on a merchant's inventory, and naturally there's a tendency to want as much property as possible classed personal. We hope the governor gets his clarifications, and we feel it in our bones that the public will get something too, an expanded sales tax.
The Minneapolis Negro community still maintains that Ron Edwards should be seated on the city's Human Rights Commission, but an influential member of the city council says Edwards is a dead issue. Nevertheless, there were several City Hall meetings today between aldermen and Negro spokesmen. Alderman Richard Erdahl says he thinks Edwards' appointment is out of the question, but he wants more discussion. Alderman Mrs. Gladys Brooks says she'd like to meet Edwards to see how he thinks. Many have objected to Ron Edwards because he has a police record. The weather and the mumps when the scene tonight continues.
Time out now for wonderful Old Dutch snacks, Old Dutch pretzels, from the makers of famous Old Dutch potato chips, so you know they're good. Choose from 3 different shapes: light, crispy, regular Old Dutch pretzel twists, popular pretzel rods, and extra thin pretzel sticks. Old Dutch pretzels are irresistible all by themselves, even better when teamed up with your favorite refreshing beverage. And you'll find Old Dutch pretzel rods are fun to serve like breadsticks along with man-sized sandwiches for lunch or supper. Or for gala hors d'oeuvres, fix a pretzel porcupine with Old Dutch pretzel sticks. You just poke them into the cream cheese and then top with an olive, a shrimp, or salami cube, whichever pretzel you prefer. They're bound to be good when they're by Old Dutch. Look for these 3 bags now at your grocer's. Old Dutch pretzel twists, extra thin pretzel sticks, and popular Old Dutch pretzel rods. Only 39 cents for a great big bag.
How fast is too fast? Well, remember, freeways are designed for high-speed travel. But what about emergency conditions when maximum speed limits are definitely out of the question? Well, drivers in our area are very familiar with emergency conditions. So keep in mind, when we have emergency weather conditions, the minimum speed limits do not apply. Your own good judgment and consideration of other drivers should be your guide. Our highways are cleared quickly. Until they are, slow down. Now, you show good judgment, too, when you choose the only Minnesota bank that pays 5% on a flexible premium savings account, Farmers and Mechanics Savings Bank. Now, deposit $1,000 or more. Then deposit or withdraw as you choose. Earn interest from the day of deposit. Also, you can leave it on deposit, take advantage of semi-annual compounding, or have it mailed to you June 1st and December 1st, interest payment dates. But get details on this new way to save at F&M.
Now listen, this may sound funny, but the world may just have found an answer to the Arab-Israeli conflict. Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. Tempers have been cooled considerably by the first major snowfall in Jerusalem in years. Both the Arabs and the Jews, in fact, have been so taken aback by the snow that they don't have time to think about their problems. Bill McLaughlin reports.
Jerusalem has seen snow before, but rarely more than a few flakes, and never anything like this. There is about 2 feet of snow so far, and the drifts are often waist-high. No one, however, seems to mind very much, at least not for the time being. The snow is too much of a novelty.
Is this the first time you've ever seen snow like this?
Yes, sir. Since 15 years.
15 years ago?
Yes, yes.
And how do you like it? How do you like snow?
Well, I like snow, you know, but the bad things in the city, everything is closed. The people here, they like it because, you know, they find it strange. The kids, they like it. They play with snow and they throw against the people and so on.
Meanwhile, their fathers are discovering the joys of trying to get a car moving in deep snow. Snowplows are scarce in the Middle East. Schools and most businesses have shut down for the duration, but some citizens refuse to let the snow interfere. In the bazaar of the Arab section, most food shops are open for what little business there is. And at the Wailing Wall, there are Orthodox Jews who seem to have welcomed the snow as a challenge to their religious fervor. The praying and the dancing goes on.
See, Jewish snow brings the same kind of joy and problems that any other kind of snow brings. Well, of course, the praying goes on here, too, praying that this January thaw is for real. Is it?
Dave, and of course everyone interested in the weather, we usually save our forecast for tomorrow toward the end of our little talk about the weather conditions, but it's no great secret that we're going to forecast 32 for tomorrow. We had a high today of 34, so our trend continues of the fog nature. Our present temperature here in our metropolitan area is 21 degrees with a humidity a bit high, 96%. Barometric pressure is 29.96 with the pressure rising, and the wind is from the south at 4 miles per hour. A weather system that is over the Oklahoma-Texas panhandle. You think that would be quite a distance from our 5-state area, but it has set in flow warm moisture toward the upper Midwest, and the humidity, 96%, is quite high over our 5-state area, very little winds, and our biggest problem is in the visibility and driving due to fog, heaviest in the east-central part of Minnesota, or from Cambridge up through Hinckley to Virginia. And some light rain may be the result, too, of the weather systems, and freezing rain forecast in some of the areas, turning to light snow in northern Minnesota. Denver is 31 degrees, 33 at Chicago, 32 at New York. And in our forecast in the 5-state area, you will notice that we have scheduled in some light rain from the eastern Dakotas across Minnesota into Wisconsin and Iowa. Most of the rain falling tonight, or light freezing rain, and ending in the early morning hours tomorrow with a chance of some light snow in northern Minnesota. Partly cloudy to occasional cloudiness is our basic forecast, and in the western Dakotas, temperatures will go from 30 to 42 degrees, northern Minnesota 25, northern Wisconsin 30, and the Iowa temperature range from 35, that's the northeastern corner of the state, to 42 in the southern part of Iowa. And a brief look at our state. We have the heaviest fog in the east-central part of Minnesota. Looks like that'll last through tonight and the early morning hours tomorrow. Fog at St. Cloud and Alexandria. It is cloudy, 25 degrees at Duluth, 12 degrees at International Falls. Some light rain tonight, possibly a little snow along the Canadian border. And partly cloudy skies for tomorrow. And northern Minnesota, the range in temperature will be 12 tonight to the high tomorrow of 35. And in southern Minnesota, 22 will be our low temperature tonight. And looks like we'll hit 40 in the southern part of the state for tomorrow. Here in our Hennepin-Ramsey County area, a low temperature tonight of 20 degrees. 32, and as we mentioned a moment ago, will be the high for tomorrow. Northwesterly winds of 10 miles per hour, and after some cloudy and fogginess tonight and the early morning hours tomorrow, partly cloudy skies by tomorrow afternoon, and the condition of partly cloudiness continuing through Friday. So concerned a little bit about the fog tonight, Dave, and maybe some freezing rain.
Wasn't it,
Thanks.
Well, wasn't it just about this time last year we had freezing rain? Maybe all the power lines are covered?
This week, a year ago, it snowed about every day as far as I...
You told me that. You had a birthday.
We had some freezing rain last year about this time, as I remember, because I wound up spending 2.5 hours to get home from work that night and then lost the power for 5 hours on my birthday.
Didn't get your wife out to dinner?
Would you believe no?
What'd you do last night on your birthday?
I worked till 2:30 in the morning.
Your time is coming up in just a moment.
Yes.
We've avoided it in our house, but mumps, they tell us, has been the vogue when the temperatures drop below 30. Happily, relief is on the way. The new mumps vaccine got its first full-fledged field test today in the little town of Cleveland, Georgia, which has been hit by what amounts to an epidemic of the mumps since school began. Today, 250 of the school kids were given the live vaccine, the first since the so-called Mumps Vax was licensed to be used on a broad scale. 4 of every 5 Americans get the mumps before they're out of their teens. So, of course, there's plenty of need for the vaccine. In the trial uses, it has proved 98% effective over a 2-year period, and doctors hope it may provide lifetime immunity to the mumps. So the experiment launched today in Cleveland, Georgia, will be watched very closely by medical experts all across the country, hoping, of course, that that promise will be fulfilled. No shortage of mumps, but we have a real shortage of stamps. We'll tell you about it in just 1 minute.
These are really good times for fun in our wonderful snow country. And this is the coffee for those good times. McGarvey Hawaiian Blend. The lively turned-on flavor of McGarvey coffee puts the tingle back in your toes. The flavor is bright and warm and rich. It's a very special blend, you know. McGarvey blends in world-famous Kona coffee beans from Hawaii. A really premium coffee is the result, and talk about freshness. McGarvey tops the list because McGarvey has the only coffee roasting plant in the entire Midwest, supplying freshly ground coffee to your favorite grocery stores, hotels, and restaurants. So, pick your good time for coffee, whatever it may be. That's the time for no-calorie cup after cup after cup of the coffee renowned for flavor and freshness throughout the Midwest. McGarvey, specially ground to fit all percolators as well as regular coffee makers. We invite you to stay tuned immediately following the news scene tonight as Jeff Chandler and Rhonda Fleming will star in Yankee Pasha on Gold Award Theater.
Seldom does one get such a strange combination as this, but we have two shortage stories on the scene tonight. At Hallock, Minnesota, 75% of the town is without water because of breaks in the water mains. There's no school and perhaps no water for the next 48 hours. Minnesota is facing a critical stamp shortage, something you may already know if you've tried to buy a 1 or a 6 center. The Chicago Post Office, which supplies Minnesota, says it will be out of stamps by midnight. No shortage of problems, ever, but Action News is getting quick results. Skip?
Dave, complaints by Action News really got some action today. At Minneapolis City Hall, the city engineer's office did report to the council's Roads and Bridges Committee about what can be done to make the 28th Street Bridge over Interstate 35W safer for pedestrians to cross, and specifically children from Clinton School. The committee voted to implement a number of those recommendations immediately. 8th Ward Alderman Gerald Hagstrom.
There will be a semaphore installed at 28th Street and Stevens. There will be stop or put speed signs along 28th Street, as well as school warning signs. There will be negotiations with the State Highway Department to install fences along the exterior of the bridge. Further, there will be a further study by the engineering department regarding some barricade that can be placed between the walking children and the moving traffic along 28th Street.
More action on the traffic problem caused by trucks docking at the Rock Island Fruit Terminal on 4th Street between Chicago and 10th Avenue South. At the request of Action News, the Minneapolis Council's Roads Committee also took up that problem today. While loading and unloading, as you may know, the trucks block 1 or 2 lanes of 4th Street, causing traffic to snarl, especially during rush hour. Police and other officials testified today that the firm had repeatedly ignored pleas to force the trucks to diagonal or parallel park, and said that ticketing violators hadn't produced results either. The city cannot impound the trucks because it has no facilities for storing the perishable fruits. The terminal will have to move in 2 years when 4th Street becomes a freeway access route anyway, but the committee finally decided that that was too long to wait. So the aldermen voted to draw up a resolution calling for the removal of the fruit terminal immediately, which was, we'll admit, even a little more than we expected. If you have a neighborhood problem, write us about it. Action News, WCCO Television, St. Paul or Minneapolis, and we'll get the answers to solve those problems for you.
You'll
David?
get the action, too, won't you? If you have an enemy, call Action News. They'll destroy them for you. Here's one that raised eyebrows at first glance. The Billy Graham Evangelistic Association has bought the Pink Pussycat restaurant in downtown Minneapolis. The boys are not planning to go into the liquor business. They need more room for expansion. Of course, that means a parking lot. First National Bank of Minneapolis will have a new president. He is George Dixon of New York. Gordon Murray will now become the chairman of the board. The stock market down again today. The Dow Jones Industrials are off more than 3 points. The exchange index off 8 cents. The story of a funeral and a forgotten man, a most unusual man, when the scene tonight continues after this word from our sponsor.
Now, Conoco Mileage Direct Service. Bring you the hottest gasoline values in town.
Ride the hot ones.
Now, at this one pump, you get 4 great new Conoco gasolines at 4 different prices. From compact to luxury car, there's a value-priced gasoline to match any engine, including the 100 new ones this year. Choose from top premium, new money-saving super for most cars now using premium, regular, and new value-priced Conotane for 60% of today's cars. Pay only for the power you need. You may save 3 cents a gallon. So go with Conoco, Mileage Direct Service. Hottest gasoline values in town.
Have you ever tried to figure out how many sandwiches it takes to satisfy the learners and the earners in your family? Well, maybe your youngsters trot home for noon lunch. Takes a lot of sandwiches any way you figure it. So why not offer the big flavor of Peter's sliced luncheon meats? Actually enough varieties for a month full of different sandwiches. Family after family state their preference for Peter's luncheon meats because they like the flavor. Yes, that's exactly why Peter's are the leaders, because of the taste of it all. so fresh and flavorful, so rich and nourishing. I like all their products, writes a Minnesota mother, and that summer sausage, it just can't be beat. So when it's time to stock up on the makings of a good sandwich, make it a big selection of Peter's delicious luncheon meats. Considering all the sandwiches you serve in a week, it figures, doesn't it? Might as well enjoy big flavor. And that's Peter's. Peter's, the leaders.
This item just in, Minneapolis narcotics agents raided a home at 4551 Garfield Avenue South, arrested 3 persons for suspicion of a narcotics violation. They have been identified as 20-year-old Matthew Rissi, R-I-S-S-I, and his 19-year-old brother Thomas of that Garfield Avenue address, and 24-year-old John Rank of 2501 Emerson South. Agents confiscated a quantity of hardcore narcotics. Both the National Council of Churches and 24 Roman Catholic bishops are going to ask the Supreme Court to outlaw racial discrimination in housing. The bishops call such discrimination a badge of slavery. A son of the South has been buried in Charleston, South Carolina, a man of whom most of us have never heard, but a man who has left his mark on the face of history. His death went all but unnoticed, even in his own hometown, but Charles Kuralt remembered and was there.
They are burying Judge J. Waties Waring today, and there should not be anything ironic in that. He was born in Charleston, went to school here, was admitted to the bar here, and finally became a judge here. But when he died in exile in New York City. There was a time when Waties Waring was at home under the moss-hung trees of this old city and welcome in the drawing rooms of its houses. He was a courtly, mannered gentleman who did not reflect deeply upon racial matters. As a judge, he was able to walk from his house on Meeting Street, past the women who have sold narcissus blossoms and magnolia sprays on this corner for so many years, walk to the federal courthouse half a block away. He had a comfortable and traditional life. But then something happened. By being a judge, he said, I gradually acquired a passion for justice. In 1947, from this bench, he ruled that Negroes had a right to vote in the all-white Democratic primary. It was the first of the post-war landmark civil rights decisions. Now, the house at 61 Meeting Street was stoned. Windows around the door there were broken. Threats were made on Judge Waring's life. 20,000 South Carolinians signed petitions demanding his impeachment. He stood unmoved. In 1951, he further ruled that segregation is per se inequality. It took the Supreme Court 3 more years to agree. By then, Judge J. Waties Waring was retired in faraway New York. Only today has he come back to Charleston, to the Magnolia Cemetery. And here, the only church service said for him today was at St. Matthew's Baptist Church, a Negro church.
This day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us.
Judge Waring, who was born here, surmounted his upbringing. No one will ever know exactly how or why.
What shall we then say?
Looking back on it, he said, Negroes have thanked me for giving them the right to vote, and that is sweetly flattering. But my colleagues in the law know that I gave them nothing. The right to vote belonged to them as much as to me, and I was just fortunate enough to be a judge deciding the question according to law. The question has long since been decided, of course. You may have forgotten that it was J. Waties Waring who decided it. But Charleston has not forgotten. There are few white mourners here today. Many people have paid a price for their civil rights advocacy, a United States District Court judge among them. Charles Kuralt, CBS News, Charleston, South Carolina.
Tonight's news report from suburban newspapers. Tomorrow's edition of the St. Louis Park Dispatch tells us a committee representing local teachers has asked for a 30% across-the-board pay increase. The Hennepin County Review reports that engineer recommendations will be given tomorrow night in Hopkins for building a sewage treatment plant on the Minnesota River. And that same paper reports that plans for Hennepin County to purchase a public boat launching site at Grays Bay on Lake Minnetonka have been squelched by 70 lake residents. But there are hundreds of residents of Bloomington now who are cheering the sudden presence of an indoor golf course in their neighborhood. All a part of Hal Scott's sports report. Hal?
We'll get to that, Dave, in just a moment. I want to report first that the game of the Minnesota Muskies at Anaheim, California is just underway in the first quarter. Minnesota leads before 26-22. The Blues beat the Minnesota North Stars 5-0 in a game tonight in St. Louis. With his former teammates serving as pallbearers, Funeral services will be held tomorrow at 2 o'clock for the North Star's Bill Masterton at the Bloomington Methodist Church. His teammates have already contributed $2,500 to the trust fund for the education of Bill's 2 children. Such contributions, by the way, should be sent to Northwestern National Bank of Bloomington. Bobby Hall of the Chicago Blackhawks said today, "It doesn't make sense. We wear expensive protective equipment for every part of our body except the most important part." And his teammate, Stan Mikita, said that he's going to have one on, a helmet that is, just as soon as he can find a good one. The mild weather of the past few days had all the golfers of the area thinking in terms of their favorite sport. But now, indoor golf has become a reality. Four Seasons Golf Club in Bloomington at 107th and France Avenue is the closest thing to the real fairways and greens you'll find. The one-time bowling alley has been transformed into 14 compartment-like units, each a complete golf course with its own 35mm film and projector, microphone and photoelectric cell, with a choice of 3 famous golf courses available. The host pro is Ross Stevens of Minnesota Valley Country Club.
You find that people have a choice?
That's right. Since Pebble Beach tournament, most people like to play Pebble Beach.
Is it more difficult?
It's pretty hard.
You find that people think that it's accurate? Is it accurate?
It is quite accurate, yes.
To within how many yards?
About 10-yard increments.
Mm-hmm. Let's take a look at, how about Congressional? Would you want to play that?
That's fine. That'll be a good one.
Now, what's the first step? What's the first thing you do when you walk into the booth, the compartment?
First thing we do is put it on play.
Okay, you push the play button. Now your course comes up, and that's a picture of the first hole,
That's
right?
the first tee on Congressional, right. The computer is activated when you hit the ball off the spot. It's activated by the microphone, and it breaks a photoelectric cell when it hits the screen. That tells our computer how far or how long it took you to get the ball from the tee to the screen. Then the computer runs a control box, and the control box runs a projector.
The only time it does not allow for something is a hook or a slice. Is that right?
That's right. They're not computed too accurately in here.
So as long as you hit the screen, your ball is always in play.
That's right.
The distance that you hit, and on the left side is the distance remaining to the hole. Well, you used your driver off the tee there on number 1.
Right.
And you went out 240 yards.
That's right.
So your next club was what?
My next shot was a 5-iron.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now you're up on the green, and I see there's a circle there that says, what is that, a 5-foot circle?
A 5-foot, we call that birdie circle, right. 5-foot birdie circle.
And if you're beyond that, it's you putt from where? From 10 feet?
From 10 feet or 20 feet. And we can have chips in here, too.
These are actual measurements?
That's right. As close as possible inside.
Do you find the putting surface is nearly the same as an actual putting surface?
I think it's as close as you'll find to a green and still be indoors.
Mm-hmm. You hold out now on number 1 at Congressional. Now, what would be the next step on the control box?
The next step would be to put it back on play and advance to the next hole.
Now, we notice there's a flickering of the screen after each shot and after the ball hits the screen. What's the purpose of this?
That's because the pictures were taken in 10-yard increments, and when they're put on the film, that's the film going through the projector until it reaches your point where you've stopped.
So if you hit a ball 100 yards, actually there'll be 10 rolls of the screen.
That's right.
And the gals take advantage of it, too. There we're looking at Susie Rettinger, who I understand is a club champion at Wayzata. She's 19 years old. And her friend there is Mrs. Ginny Loma, also a member at Wayzata Country Club. So the gals do take advantage of this.
The girls are starting to find it now.
Former Twins manager Sam Ely, hired by the Boston Red Sox as an instructor in their farm system, said today that he turned down an offer to manage the new Oakland Athletics of Charlie Finley. And the vice president of the California Angels, Cedric Tallis, has taken the same job with the new Kansas City franchise. Schenectady New York High School defeated Albany 77-60 tonight, which is no great shakes, except the game was played secretly, with only players, coaches, and officials allowed to watch, in addition to the cameraman who took this picture. The game was postponed from last week because of a student riot right before the game. The NCAA Rules Committee has made these football changes: elimination of the new punt return rule, outlaw the sucker shift, clipping at the line of scrimmage, the fake fair catch, and the tackle-eligible play. The new Cincinnati Bengals completed the 40-man stocking of their club today, and among others picked up fullback Cookie Gilchrist and flanker Chris Burford. The president of the U.S. Track and Field Federation, aligned with the NCAA, has called on the Justice Department to investigate what he called the antitrust actions of the AAU. Meanwhile, Congressman Tom Rees of California has threatened legislation if the two groups fail to settle what he called their childish feud. The Olympic speed skating team was chosen today at West Allis, Wisconsin, with Bill Cox of St. Paul, second from the left there in the top row, and Tom Gray of Minneapolis, second from the left in the bottom row, making the squad. Flanker Homer Jones of the New York Giants has challenged Bob Hayes of the Dallas Cowboys to a foot race. And the world's fastest human has reportedly accepted. It'll take place this Sunday at the Pro Bowl game at the Los Angeles Coliseum here on Channel 4. Hayes, while at Florida A&M, set the world 100-yard dash record of 9 1/10 seconds and won the 100 meters in the '64 Olympics. It has been generally felt that he's the fastest man carrying a football, too. Conceded by everyone, that is, except Jones, who did his track running at Texas Southern and who once beat Hayes in the 100. This Sunday, each will be in full football uniform, both carrying a football. 100 yards is the distance. Promoter Bob Heine, meanwhile, has signed St. Paul heavyweights Jim Beattie and Aaron Eastling. The 6'9", 245-pound Beattie will meet the 200-pound Eastling on Friday night, February the 2nd, at the St. Paul Armory in a 10-rounder. It'll be Beattie's first fight since his knockout loss last year in Miami. Eastling has lost only once in his professional career. And with the card coming up at the Minneapolis Auditorium, January the 29th, pro boxing activity is at a peak now here in the cities. The St. Louis Blues beat the Minnesota North Stars 5-0 tonight in a game in St. Louis. As we go now to our scoreboard. New York over Chicago, 4-2. Montreal defeated Detroit 6-1. In high school hockey, St. Paul Johnson over Humboldt 6-2. Murray defeated Central 5-2. Harding and Monroe played to a 2-2 tie. In the ABA, Pittsburgh over Indiana. New Jersey defeated Kentucky. New Orleans over Houston. In the NBA, Detroit defeated San Francisco. Boston over St. Louis. San Diego defeated Chicago. College basketball, Georgia defeated Mississippi State. Notre Dame over Butler. Western Kentucky over Dayton in overtime. Georgia Tech defeated Furman. Augsburg over St. John's of Collegeville. Drake defeated Iowa State. In the NBA, New York over Baltimore by 2 points.
And I trust tomorrow we'll get the odds makers line on the Homer Jones-Bob Hayes foot race.
Yeah, that would figure.
How would you put that?
I'd sooner have Travis Williams of Green Bay in there. I think he stands as good a chance of beating Hayes as does Homer Jones.
I think that race is going to make the Pro Bowl game itself anticlimactic. That'll be the feature.
I hope not.
We'll look at the scene tomorrow after this word.
At last, as it really happened, WAB Productions present The Outdoorsman. Join the outdoorsman in the greatest hunting and fishing adventure ever filmed, acclaimed by sportsmen from coast to coast. In color on the big screen.
Don't miss The Outdoorsman, greatest hunting and fishing spectacular ever filmed, now showing at these Twin City theaters and coming soon to many theaters outside the Twin Cities. Watch for it.
The scene tomorrow, Senator Eugene McCarthy will carry his presidential campaign to the Twin Cities. He'll be followed here by Vice President Humphrey on Friday. Bud?
Becoming cloudy with possible fog late tonight in our metropolitan area and lasting through the morning hours tomorrow and clearing tomorrow afternoon. Low tonight should be 20 with a high tomorrow of 32 degrees. So the fog continues. Now, here's Hal.
Channel 4 Sports tomorrow night, here on the scene tonight, will cover the Metro JC basketball team.
Now, this is for all of us old duffers. Anyone over 40 is eligible to enjoy this one. The King of Swing, Benny Goodman, staged a nostalgic concert at Carnegie Hall last night, the 30th anniversary of his first Carnegie Hall concert that made jazz history. But Goodman wasn't alone in his nostalgia, as we hear now from David Culhane.
Lionel Hampton on the vibe. Gene Krupa on the drums. Not quite as crisp as he used to be, but still something special. Rudy Braff on the trumpet. The low-down piano of Jeff Stacy. Even the song titles sound like 1938. Avalon, Rose Room, Body and Soul. Most of the guests at the party dated from the swing era of the 30s. They were happy to sit this one out, but they registered loud approval for the old jazz. Like all family gatherings, there was plenty of gossip, the exchange of news, and of course, a cake. in celebration of the 30th anniversary. But it was still the music itself that made the party such a great success. There was even a lady downstairs who complained about that terrible noise. She couldn't have known that that terrible noise was a bit of history.
They don't make bands like that anymore, right?
Right.
The scene yesterday, that's the scene tonight.
The Scene Tonight from WCCO Television News, Communications Headquarters for the Northwest, presented in part by Peter's Meat Products and by Farmers and Mechanics Savings Bank.